Apple loves to tout their mobile performance lead at every iPhone event. Apple believes it's so far ahead that they don't even feel the need to put their latest gen processor in their non-pro devices. In years past, Apple's commanding performance lead might have held true, but has Apple now lost its edge? Back in December, some of the first high-end Android phones shipped with Qualcomm's latest Snapdragon 8 Gen 2. By all accounts, a fantastic chip, and the benchmarks certainly showed it. While Apple's latest A16 Bionic still led by around 26.5% in single-core performance, the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 took a commanding lead in sustained graphics performance by around 40%. The performance difference from a cool start is a lot smaller, only around 16%, still in favor of the Snapdragon chip. These early benchmark numbers no doubt gave a glimmer of hope to the Android diehards who were finally waiting for the day Qualcomm would beat Apple. But to put a long story short, that day still has yet to come. Let's fast forward to February of current year, and Samsung is in the midst of launching their new flagship Galaxy S23 Ultra, which, by the way, make sure you're subscribed, as we'll be doing a review on it. The S23 Ultra boasts the best version seen yet of the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, as its 4 Galaxy SKU is an overclocked version of the already existing chip. If Apple were to have lost its edge, this would no doubt be the processor that did it. Jumping right into the performance metrics, the modest overclock on the 4 Galaxy processor, while it has a noticeable bump, still isn't enough to overcome single and multi-core performance of the A16 Bionic. Furthermore, on the graphics side of things, the 4 Galaxy Snapdragon just wins harder than the normal 8 Gen 2. How has Apple lost the graphics performance battle, at least as far as synthetic benchmarks are concerned? The short answer is thermals. Apple seems to have a problem with cooling its A16 Bionic processor, leading to such the performance gap we see in the sustained graphics testing. That's the 40% gap I mentioned earlier. Apple is forced to thermal throttle its processor so hard that when gaming for longer than 2 minutes at a time on your phone, which I'd imagine most people do, Apple significantly dials back its performance to maintain safe operating temperatures. The Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 featured on the S23 Ultra has an ultra-robust cooling solution, making the already better performing chip less prone to throttling. So Android finally did it, right? After years of silicon wars and a little bit of help from TSMC, Qualcomm has finally emerged victorious this generation. To validate our victory, it's important to look at real-world usage metrics, say playing an actual game, and in this case, let's take Genshin Impact. As per some early performance results, we still see the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 take a bit of a lead over the A16 Bionic, but not the Galaxy version, and definitely not as much of a gap between the two chips as the synthetic benchmark would make you think, as the difference in Genshin is only about 2%, a vastly smaller margin than the 40% difference shown in the synthetic benchmarks. What do all of these results tell us? Well, outside of synthetic benchmarks are not necessarily indicative of real-world performance, the problem Apple is running into isn't the design of the silicon, which given efficiency metrics I would argue is still superior, but the thermal solution Apple uses. It's the same reason why in the benchmarks, the 4 Galaxy Snapdragon performs worse than the non-overclocked version of the same chip. It's because the device the processor is in isn't equipped to properly handle the thermals or the processor. If Apple were to fix one thing, it has to be how thermals and cooling are handled on the device itself. But considering Apple still has a performant lead in single and multi-core performance, as well as a, in the real world, 2% worse performing chip due to thermals, I'd say redesigning the cooling solution in iPhones is a fairly low priority for Apple. Apple hasn't lost its edge, it's just sweating a little bit. But if you'd like to hear what happens when a chip gets too hot, check out our video here, and I'll see you in the next one.